things, they are so...
How do you paint?
I tried once to paint, but I never...
No.
I don't have talent in painting. I like to look at paintings. I love paintings, but... Oh, did something happen? Ah, this is the chair. Oh, it's okay.
Quelque chose qui ne marche pas?
Parce que la chaise, quand je bouge, ça donne des sons. Et je pense que ça, peut-être c'est mieux. J'ai entendu un son et j'ai pensé c'est quoi? Et c'était la chaise. Maintenant, là. Excusez-moi pour tout ça. Ah, très bien. Maintenant. Et good. So, you've been before we talked about your biography, the biography of you and your husband meeting in Germany and then having all these different stations in your life. And the first question, how did you meet, and perhaps where do you come from, and how did you meet your husband?
Well, I was born in Poland, and I went to school there. And then I was an unruly student, and I asked my parents if I can take a year off and to go visit my uncle, who always formerly was in Warsaw and even Minister of Culture for a short while, visit him for a year, and then I would go back to school. And they said, if he is for it, I can do it. And he was for it. So I went to Frankfurt am Main for a year.
And when was that? In which year?
When was that? Well, that must have been the end of the 20s, must have been 1929 or 30, something. I never was good at dates, so I sometimes will probably give you wrong dates or wouldn't know which year it is, because that mathematics and dates and numbers was never my strong point.
Yeah, but that's not.
Yes,
it's not so important.
No, in biography it should be reasonably accurate, but I will try it to be accurate.
And when are you born in Poland? In which year are you born?
1910.
1910. Oh, 88 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. And when you went to Germany, you went to Frankfurt am Main?
Yes.
To visit your uncle there.
Yes, I stayed there, and they went visiting his brother, my uncle's brother, in USA. So I was alone there with my two nephews. They were little boys, 8 and 6 or 9 or 5, and a German housekeeper. Emilia, I think was her name. She ran the household. And my uncle was, so to say, the center of all the people who went to the Frankfurt am Main University and were coming from Poland. So the hall was always full of people. And then somebody came and asked for Dr. Wagner, which was his name, my uncle's, and I didn't speak any German. I said, no, no, Dr. Wagner. No. And he said that he's a painter, and he painted my uncle and his children, and he would like to see the paintings. I just said something like, no, 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 and closed the door. And the housekeeper came and said, oh my God, this is Mr. Isenburger, you must let him in. And so he came in, stayed for lunch, and then it started to take me out to show me Frankfurt am Main and teaching me some German. And that was it.
That's a very nice story. That you said no, 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 and in the end you said when he
well,
asked you to
then I learned to say yes,
yes.
and everything. Yeah.
Wonderful. And did you, from Frankfurt, where did you go then? Did you stay there for a while? And
Well, my parents gave, I was underage or something, said that it will be all right, but they would like to talk to him. He met my mother, who visited every year my uncle in Germany from Poland. And so we went to the little village where I was born, on the German border, and they wanted to have a big wedding, and my father died of a heart attack a week before. So Eric and I left. We were married very quickly, and we left. And we went to Vienna because his family, who was very, one could say rich, and bankers, were all against his marrying a little Polish girl. They thought a Rothschild would be the right, the right person, because he had it in the art school where he was a master student. There was a young Rothschild who was a good painter, and they were good friends. And uncle of Eric's had stables and horses, so he was riding with the young Rothschild. So the family just thought, that's it, that is a fait accompli. And then suddenly picked a poor little Polish girl, that was, so they said they will have nothing to do with us.
did it change? Did
The family changed?
Did they change?
Never.
Never?
Never.
They've been always against you.
Yes.
That's
None
very
of them
sad.
invited me or wanted to know me. Only one aunt, who was herself a painter, a very nice woman, she invited us. The rest of the family ignored.
That's sad. These
Well, I
family-
didn't care very
family-
much. I
yeah.
had no feeling for status.
Oh, it's better not to have it because it's a
Yes.
relief. Yeah.
Yes, well.
Because why should one care about
Well,
this?
now it wouldn't be the same thing, but then it was.
Yeah. And you told me, or I have been told, that you've been a dancer. Did you take dancing lessons?
Well, I always wanted to dance, but my parents didn't think it is honorable for a young woman to go to a dancing school. So I went to a dancing school when I married. I was young enough to do it. And I first went to Hellerau, and then I joined, well, actually I didn't join the group because I went first in the classes of a dancer, Gertrude Kraus, who was a very good dancer, and had a very nice dancing group, and she then eventually included me.
And that was in Vienna?
That was in Vienna.
Uh-huh. And Hellerau, you've been there before?
No, but Hellerau is very near Vienna.
Oh yeah, so...
I went every day there.
Ah, yeah. And how did you like Hellerau and the atmosphere?
Well, it's really quite long ago, and I really didn't particularly like it because it was just too much Wald und Wiese dancing, and that didn't interest me. And Gertrude Krauss had very interesting ideas. She was a little wild, with wild hair, and always a cigarette between her lips in the middle of the dancing group. And she had very much temperament and reason and ideas, and that pleased me.
So you joined them?
So I was with her, and then Eric's mother, as things started to get bad in Germany, thought she would lose all her money. She was very, very spoiled woman. She would go to Cairo in spring, and St. Moritz in winter. So she thought she would become a poor woman, and she committed suicide. And then Eric, with his brother who lived in USA, inherited, but she put some money in USA banks. And on the brother's name, and she warned Eric that this is not a good idea, but Eric really was not money conscious. He was used to it, but he was not money conscious. Oh, he said, we will work it out. Well, it wasn't so. Anyhow, so there was some money, and we decided that we can now go to Berlin and have a studio. And we took an architect who was a friend of ours, Mr. Neufeld, and he came here to the United States also after the Nazis took over. And he was teaching, as far as I remember, in Princeton architecture. And for fun, he said, he will do us a studio, see things should look. And so it took a whole year for him to get the studio and one extra room to do it as he likes to do it. By that time, Hitler was coming, and we were in that studio only 1 year, and had to leave everything there, including his family's silver, which was a huge big piece of furniture with everything, 24 oyster forks and 24 ice cream things, everything. And I gave the key to a young German woman who was a dancer, and that was it. Everything got lost.
And when did you have the feeling that things would get worse? Because you've mentioned your mother-in-law who committed suicide, and why?
Well, she did it way before, but we really did not pay attention, and we were really true Bohemia. We just never read papers. We didn't bother with radio. Eric was painting. I was dancing. In the evening, we had friends. And we would go and see everything from Kurt Weill, and we would go to the opera. And we just didn't pay attention, and then suddenly Woody was there. Eric had an exhibition at that point, and Wolfgang Golit was then in Berlin, a very important gallery, and he was a very important man altogether, so to say, financially so. And during the exhibition there appeared an article in subject, I think it was called The Student, and it was a Nazi painting, literary, and there was a nasty article of Eric's being typical, demeaning German art, etc. And it was a very nasty article. And people still didn't believe that anything would happen to anybody, really, truly. But a few more clever people saw the clouds, and Gullit, the art gallery owner, said, why don't you go for a couple of weeks to Paris and see how things develop? And he knew the French consul, so he telephoned, we got a visa in 24 hours. And we went to Paris, and we were sitting at the Café Dome in Montparnasse every day, and more people were arriving. And suddenly everybody whom we knew in Berlin was on the Montparnasse in Paris, so things were not getting better. Mm-hmm. And that was it.
And how did you, because you mentioned the Reichstagsbrand, the fire of the Reichstag?
Oh yes, well that was one of the signs that things get very bad, and that you cannot ignore it as a passing, so to say, they voted in Hitler and his Nazi party, but nobody believed that they would survive, that they were lost. But with the Reichstag, it showed that they would take means that nobody expected to.
And was it clear to you that the fire was laid by the Nazis? Because,
oh yes.
Yeah, because the Nazis said that the communists did it, but everybody knew that it was just
that's what
made up.
Everybody saw.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's very interesting what you said, that people kept arriving in Paris and more went away. You told me last time that you experienced the 20s right at the end, that you said it was a very wild and lively atmosphere in Berlin at the time, culturally.
Yes, it was very interesting, not only good wild and bad press, but people were like Ksenek, the musician. The operas were not performed in Switzerland, were not performed in Paris. Paris always waits 15 years till a modern opera is shown. Everything was done in Berlin and some other cities. So culturally, there was a great movement, an interesting movement. And it concentrated in Berlin. And we knew a Hungarian, well-known Hungarian also, whose name I've forgotten in a while, and I never read him because it was not translated. And to him, Berlin of this time, he called it the Athens of the 20th century, because everything was there. The decor, the ballet, everything was revolutionary, was new. And I went then, after we came to Berlin, to the Mary Wigman School, which was not run by Mary Wigman, by a woman, Margaret Wallman, because Wigman was in Dresden. But everything was very modern and revolutionary in art, in dance, in music, in decor, in furniture. And people just didn't believe that that can be stopped like that.
And why do you think that atmosphere was so lively? Was there a lot of support by the society for it, or by the Weimar government for culture?
Well, I really never was. No, I pay attention and listen to television and know more about politics. But in those days, I really didn't know anything about and didn't want to know anything. about it. I thought, this is a different world. I don't belong there and I don't want to know that. But what I think is that the core of the German people had nothing to do with the cultural elite, and really probably hated them. So there was nothing, it didn't merge in any way. There were the German people who hated, who were all against it, what was going on, which the intellectual elite really invented and loved and protected. And then probably also because of the financial, there was no money and there was much to complain of.
Yeah. Should we make a short break? And I'll listen to it?
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
It's wonderful. It's so nice how you talking about these things. I just stop it and try to listen to it. Because it's to have both. Do you remember, let's say, a performance you very much liked at the time, or an exhibition you said, oh, that's been marvelous, and I
You
liked
mean in
it
Berlin?
in Berlin, or
Well, yes, the Kurt Weill, the Russian opera, Mahagoni, and also there were cabarets. I remember a wonderful woman. Well, she was really Valeska Gerd. And the Valeska Gerd, they were really very inventive. There was even a dancer in Berlin. She was German. Her name was Eckstein. And he was then being American. And they gave recitals. And they were sort of between cabaret and dance. And they were perfectly beautiful. And they were very sophisticated and very interesting. I don't know what happened to Eckstein, but then he came back to his home in USA after the war. And of all places, we ran into him in Positano, Italy, because he started to live there. And we were there a couple of months. So really people from all sides and all countries were at that point in Berlin and did what they felt like doing, and it was very spectacular and very wonderful. And there was a painter, Karl Neyer, if I'm quite right, and he did wonderful decors for ballet and theater. It was very, very artistically stimulating, intellectually stimulating.
I think your husband did costumes for ballet too in Vienna. He did costume design for a ballet.
You mean Vienna was before Berlin? No, I think he did all the costumes. Oh, in Vienna I did a few for Yiddish theater, which was also quite avant-garde and inspired by Russian theater, but very good. And he did some of the decor and painted it himself for them because they didn't have money. But in Berlin we were friends with a couple who were solists of the Charlottenburger Opera and were wonderful, wonderful dancers. And he did some costumes for them. And then he did some costume in France for me when I started to dance on my own.
Are there some photographs perhaps of these? Do you have photographs or
Yes, I have photographs.
wonderful. And look at them. That's very interesting. Because you've been in dance and he as a painter, so that's been a wonderful combination.
Yes, it was.
And in Paris, how did you like your life there?
Well, in Paris, it was very difficult because it was like being suspended in the air. Everybody thought that we all go back to our old life. Nobody imagined that that was the end of the road. And so people were huddling together, sitting in cafes, talking like you wait for the late train or something. It doesn't mean you don't go anywhere, the train is just delayed and you have to sit and wait. So that's what they were doing, sitting in cafes waiting till they can go home. And slowly started to dawn on everybody that they won't be back home.
Wow.
And then each chose a different road. And we were in Paris and it had very good studio. At that time, when it comes to finances, I am not very good at it. But at that time, you could get a monthly from Germany regulated by the state. And if I am not wrong, it was something like 4,000 francs. But again, I never understood this sort of things. And it started to become more and more difficult in Paris. And we got the idea, which was very revolutionary at this time, go in summer to the Riviera. Because nobody got to the Riviera in summer, they all went to the North Sea, or something like that, or some cool places. But we found that it was just wonderful, it was so cheap. Nobody had money in those days. So, and there was nobody in Nice but the Niçois. So everything was very cheap. You could eat for nothing. You could buy the most wonderful vegetable and fruit for nothing. And we loved it all together. We found the studio near, just one block away from the sea. And we were very happy there. So first we went there only for the summer, but then we decided to stay the second summer. And then something very exceptional happened. A Swiss very rich couple, who was always coming to come, they had an idea that they would like to have, well, they had a lot of tobacco in Central America, in Switzerland, everything. And suddenly we had also a friend who had a plantation of peaches in south of France. And they knew the parents of this friend of ours who was a sculptor, Demeter. And they had suddenly an idea that they are going to buy up all sorts of land in south of France and make peach and apricot plantation, and were looking for artists who need support to work on it, and for that they become also co-owners. And lucky we were, because the woman liked me and Demeter liked Eric, because they understood each other very well as sculptor and painter. We got one of the nicest plantations. It was a beautiful, beautiful 17th century farm, and we could decide how it should be inside. And the whole land, it was above a church and a grocery. And we had everything there, everything. And hyacinths were just growing out between stones, and we had a vineyard, and we had jasmine, and we were selling jasmine to the Graus Parfumerie. We had a wonderful time there, and it was a lovely thing. Also, this Swiss couple bought a lot of Eric's painting, and were very happy to pay him with Swiss francs. So when the war broke out, and he went to the Camp de Rassemblement, which is not a concentration camp, but it's a camp. And the French government, which was just a mess. It wasn't cruel, but it was a mess. So the Swiss franc helped us very much because we could get on the black market quite a lot. Otherwise, there was just no other income. So here, I passed by many other adventures and arrived there.
But how did it come that your husband had to go into this camp?
Well, when France declared war with Germany, there were posters everywhere that anybody born in a country that is now occupied by Germany has to present himself. Only the men, it said. Present himself, and they will make a tirage to find out who is a fake and a spy for the Nazis and who is a legitimate immigrant. But that things never worked out. It went on for half a year, and they never got it all cleared up. And Eric had played quite a great role. So he was not a pushy man, that you can say. As a matter of fact, he will always rather stood back and observe and smoke his pipe than take. But somehow they trusted him, so he was in each case taken into a trusted position. And in between, the men from the south of France were all taken to Marseille. And that was quite terrible, because there was no water, and it was a former brick factory, so everything was covered with red dust. And then he was drawing people constantly. And in between them he was drawing inmates mostly, but soldiers and officers. And the officers were all actually not really military men, but turned out silk factory owners from Lyon who were just taken into the army because they needed more people. And they liked the drawings, and they took the drawings, and also the doctor took the drawings. And some of them asked Eric if he couldn't do a couple of more drawings for them. And he gave it to them, and for that the doctor suddenly wrote that he has a very bad case of pulmonary weakness. And he was sent home. And he stayed a couple of months, and then they got everybody back. And then he went to another concentration camp which was near Nîmes. And there they had much better time. That means the landscape was wonderful, except if you had a choice, you would live in such a landscape. And they also handled the people the Saint-Cyrien officers were the one who was running they were all for the emigres and all against Petain. And so there he had a beautiful handwriting here. Took him to the office to write out permits and things and keep papers and all that. And he really did something. He did for dozens and dozens of people, given him with wrong signature, but he imitated it very well, and gave them a freedom. They would go away, passes. And eventually one day he gave himself and a friend who lived nearby in grass passes. So he came home. Then, yes. And that was the last time. First he was given freedom from the Marseille camp, from the doctors as pulmonary. In between there was a whole story where he was, when he came back, because of pulmonary, so to say, affliction, we had a friend in Nice who knew everybody. He said that he can arrange something, and he called up a policeman who looked like out of a B-movie gangster with a white fedora, and he gave him money, I remember, several thousand francs, and he said it's all arranged, and Eric was put in a hospital for pulmonaries outside Nice. And there he was lying 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Meanwhile, everybody collected letters and names for him. And he got a letter from André Gide, and he got a letter from André Malraux. And the prefect wife suddenly remembered that she had an exhibition in Monte Carlo, and he had paintings there. So he was given again freedom to go home. But we were not trusting anybody, so we didn't go back into our house. And we went to a small pension that we knew, because it was in the same garden as the studio was when we were in Nice. That's very funny. And we stayed there, and he telephoned with his brother in USA, and I kept on saying, what do you telephone for? We don't have the money to go there. Nobody can get a visa. But he persisted, and we got a visa.
And did the brother of your husband?
Well, partly the brother talked to everybody he could, and he got a letter from from the State Department, and the director of the Museum of Modern Art saw some paintings, and he wrote for him. And the brother gave him affidavit that he would take care of everything. And after long waiting, we got the visa. And we went via Spain and Portugal, which we almost were arrested in Spain because they had a concentration camp in Spain too. And we arrived here in 1941.
And you arrived by boat? You took the boat from Portugal, from Lisbon?
From Lisbon, yes, to New York.
How did you feel arriving in New York?
I really didn't want to go. I loved France so much. It was my country of my mind, the country of my heart. Everything seemed to me, the civilization, the intelligence, the literature, the painting, everything seemed to me so ideal. I couldn't believe that can anything happen. And Paris was always the place where all emigres through centuries went to save themselves. But I didn't understand enough. I was stupid and at the time. And I felt, well, I didn't speak a word of English. Eric spoke fluent, but I not a word, since I always talked a lot. I felt very, very difficult. But when he was in concentration camp, he received a letter from an art dealer in New York, Blanche Bonster, East 57th Street. And he heard from other friends, painters, that the 57th Street is the gallery at that time as well. It is hub of art in New York. So when we arrived here, he looked her up. And she came to see us. We lived in a very funny place without any money. We arrived with $25. And she said, oh, you are too good for my gallery. You should be at Nödlers, which was next door, and was the foremost gallery. And she spoke there to people, and there was a Russian, Basil Petrov, who headed the contemporary section. And he came to see Eric, and they just went so right. And he had the first exhibition after a couple of months, and it worked out very well. And then we found this small studio at 57th Street above a gallery, Milch Gallery, and he liked Eric's painting. So when we ran out of money and couldn't pay rent, he would take a painting. And next door was living Max Ernst, because there was a big hotel at that time between 6th and 7th Avenue, very well known, and many Europeans lived there. And before Max Ernst married Peggy Guggenheim, or tried not to marry Peggy Guggenheim, whatever the situation was, as a neighbor came and offered Eric $1,000. He said, I can afford it or something. And Eric at that day sold 2 paintings, so he was so proud. He said, no, thank you. We are doing all right, so that was it.
Oh, very,
yeah.
Very tense.
Well, I jumped over all sorts of little things.
Yeah, but it's very nice, the journey from France to the States. You're describing that so beautifully. The gap, also the psychological problem, going away from Europe.
Yes, well, I thought you were asked a question, but once I started to talk, I jumped over certain things, because there are so many little stories in between. How we got the visa, how we got to Lisbon, and how it was in Lisbon.
Oh.
We almost got stuck there and things like that.
Why did you get stuck there? Was it difficult to get
out? No, we had such difficulties with visas to get out of France. Spain wouldn't let you go through Spain unless you show them the Portuguese visa, so that they know that you go further and not stay there. The Portuguese wouldn't give you till the Spanish would give you. And the French won't give you till you have the Spanish and the Portuguese. It was just like a madhouse, a Kafka story. Yeah. So that it was pretty. And when we arrived, we missed the boat for which we had tickets. I think by 12 hours or so. And suddenly we didn't know what to do. And you know, there were many immigrants. They would go to Lisbon, get stuck, and the Portuguese would put them in prison. They didn't want them running around and making bets. And suddenly we remembered that my uncle, to whom I went in the first place and where we met, in whose house we met, had a very great friend, a diamond dealer in Portugal, Lisbon. And we looked up in the telephone book, and there were several names, but it was not him. I think it was his sons. And they came to our rescue. I forgot the sum, but they gave us a sum that would be sufficient to stay till the next boat can take us, so that we escape the prison as penniless emigres. So we stayed there 6 weeks.
Waiting for the boat?
For the next boat.
Oh, that's it's like an adventure. Like a
yes,
film.
it is, it is,
Like
it is.
You could make a film out of it.
Oh,
It's
yes,
like
you could.
wow.
Very easily.
Yeah. Could I make another break, a short one?
Yes, please.
Just because I think there's a little bit water dropping in the background in the sound.